This video is the complete guide to cost control in construction. We're going to speak to a real project manager, a global expert on cost control, and find out all the things that you need to know, including systems, tips, tricks, and key areas where you can add value to your next project. What's like your definition of cost control? Like, what is cost control to you? Gut feel?
It's keeping current with the changes in the projects, right? You know, construction and changes are quite fluid, and it's keeping current so you know the current status and health of the project. I think that's really important because too often, provisional sums or contingencies are sort of blown out or not managed properly, and there's all the downstream effects of using your budgets too early, etc. So it's, I think, other ways to put it.
And would that mean cost control is like starting at the very beginning of the project with the budget?
Yeah, it's starting at the procurement phase. So it's making sure that there's a clear understanding of risk, and that any risk that sits with the client side is actually defined and has its own separate pools of contingency available for those risks, as opposed to an overall holistic project contingency.
Yeah,
because each risk has its own potential cost and time impact. So sort of breaking those down to build up a total contingency number. So it starts at the procurement phase, making sure that you know what cost could be incurred. Particularly things for provisional sums are a big thing for us. They're not defined. That's for undesigned scope. They're not defined. The estimates are often way undercooked. You come construction or 2 years down the track, people forget what that sum of money was allocated for, usually because the definition was so loosely defined. And then they get reinterpreted, whoever wants to interpret them their own way. So that's the procurement phase. It's locking down fixed cost for an open cost. And then through construction phase, it's about sort of making sure, cost control, you got your standard payment claims, cash flows, so that's all cost control. Cash flow is quite key and not often measured because it's a good reflection of program. And then other things, other cost control being variations that come in understanding if we're picking up on any trends and money being spent where it shouldn't be. And I think just keeping current, being able to know where we're spending money and what's left, because there's a danger of a lag effect there. And you got to know your current position at all times. So,
and
to make sure you still finish the project.
Yeah, make sure you finish the project. That's a good idea when you're providing project management. And so you separate out like budgeting and cost control as like two different things. Cost control relates to the budget. Like, what's the difference between the budgeting side and the cost control side?
Well, budgets are your pre-contract value, right? Too often people don't put budgets aside. They have quite a large, a budget for consultant fees or a budget for construction, but they haven't actually broken it down into what feeds into the budget, the different, shall we say, lines.
Disciplines. They don't actually break the budget down into
No, they just give you like
disciplines.
A consultant lump sum. They don't break it down into disciplines.
Yeah.
And same with construction. You often cost control, you have a contract sum, but there's no one's actually priced the risks that you haven't contracted out of, and that sits there as open. Usually they remain. So they're unpriced. Yeah.
So would it be fair to say like then cost control is almost like you were saying, tracking payments, tracking change orders, variations, tracking cash flow, all of that relative, back to a budget. And then you're kind of seeing if you're over budget or under budget based on your final forecast cost.
You can look at the forecasted burn as to where your trajectory is going. We have the QSs that do the value and the variations and checking the finer detail, but we need to sit over it in terms of more an overall picture.
And how over in New Zealand, how accurate do you think those early stage budgets are? Like, are they nearly always wrong, or are they mostly right, or what's kind of blows them out most of the time, other than like sewage treatment plant overflows?
Usually there's a big push to get the number to marry up to the bankable number. So often we'll value engineer the project through that procurement phase to get it to the number that it needs to be.
Squashing it down.
Squashing everything down to get it to a number that's going to make it fundable.
Yeah.
And then once the finance is in place, usually often those are reversed back out, which is not uncommon. And then, like I said, the risks naively kind of ignored, as in they're not going to eventuate.
Yeah. Oh, they won't
And
happen.
they do.
Yeah.
They do eventuate. And then the other one is often just usually in New Zealand, contracts are more traditional and even the design and build agreements are not true design and build. I think like you see in Australia, where all that risk sits with the developer. And typically that is because we don't transfer to a contract or like say into developed design, and it leaves more wiggle room for the contractor to reprice.
So what stage of design are they receiving the design then?
Depending on the type of contract, so design and build, you'll probably get that at the end of developed design or midway through developed.
So they only really have a small chance to kind of own the design from that point onwards.
Yeah, a small, and a lot of we always say that the influencing factors are at the very front end of design. That's where the prelim design, that's when the key decisions are made. You're locked in the facade, the structure, the systems you're going to use, and going through the detailed design, that's more the nuance and coordination. So you have little ability, come detailed design and onwards, there's very little. There's the ability, but it's not cost effective to start changing wholesale systems. You're kind of locked in for the project.
Totally. Yeah, there's some great charts that show that, like the ability to influence the total cost of the project is highest right at the beginning, and then basically diminishes to almost zero as the project continues.
Yeah. And you're running with all your consultants at a much higher cash flow, so stopping and starting is not so easy.
So, and then once you complete the procurement phase and you start like actually tracking the costs. So you guys were using spreadsheets before, kind of using Mastt now. How do you think people will perform that kind of cost control function? Like once costs start needing to be, tracked and controlled.
Yep.
How do they actually do that?
So how it works and how we typically do is we'll either do an instruction to a contractor as to make a change, and we'll flag that very high level as do we anticipate there to be a cost or not, or is there entitlement to a cost or not. Then it's up to them to put the claim in, and there's a danger of that lag. That can be a month or more before you actually understand that true price, because they're still waiting to go to the subcontractor, or they can't get a price because they haven't engaged in the market. In that interim period, we do rely on the client side QS to put budgets against those instructions. And then we sort of wait for the contractor's claim and try and get that alignment between expectation versus what they're putting forward.
Yep.
And then we sort of certify that value as a bit of an instruction. So for us, the Mastt allows us to have like a single source of truth, as in like all the costs and instructions are one centralized location, including payment claims. And because it's not an Excel file, it can't be manipulated to make a number. It kind of pulls through the true cost. The danger and what we see is the lag between the instruction and the forecast cost and the contractor's claim being received, which can be months, and therefore decisions are made to commit or instruct costs without knowing the true extent.
Yeah, without knowing what the real price is.
Yeah, real price is. So I think at Mastt you've got that functionality to sort of pre-assign budgets to something that hasn't yet been picked up by the QS or the contractor.
Yep. So you're using Mastt to actually almost not predict, but forecast the costs and develop like an accurate final forecast cost.
Yeah, it's putting a budget to it, not putting a budget to an instruction or a change.
Yep. And if that price comes back or that change comes back and it's unfunded, will there be some type of transfer of the contingency? Are you guys holding all of your risks that are, they're quantified risk, costed risks in the contingency, like a risk-based build-up of contingency, and then actually transferring out of that into the construction budgets to cover off on these costs?
Yes, foreseeable costs though. And costs that are likely to transpire. But it's It's the higher level risks that have a low level of eventuating, but have a much higher impact should they occur. They're the ones that often are priced, because if you price them all, the project wouldn't stack up.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I doubt anyone would have had, tons of money in their risk registers and cost trackers for COVID, for example.
No, and general things like environmental contaminants, particularly if you're doing a remediation or a brownfield sort of development on an existing build. The undiscoverables, there's only so much due diligence that can be done prior.
Yep. And the kind of breakup of that, like we've got these standard categories in Mastt that are like, client changes, contamination, legal. There's a few other categories that you can assign to changes and variations that kind of broadly allow you to tag that information to kind of see the makeup of it at the end of the project. What's the kind of big category, in your opinion, that most of the kind of blowouts are coming from?
Blowouts typically client instructions, scope adjustments, and unforeseeable sort of ground
conditions.
Yep. Yeah, well, there's been due diligence, but it's different. That's usually where we see change.
And is that like, what are the contaminants you have over there? Like, is it you've got any PFAS or asbestos or just, dewatering?
Yeah, you got
contaminants, archaeological stuff, archaeological.
All of that, all the same. And also ground conditions. I mean, New Zealand and Auckland in particular, we've got so many. The ground conditions vary site by site. You can't run a general rule of thumb across the Auckland. It's very volcanic. There's a lot of volcanoes around Auckland. Rock and different types of rock, sediments. We've got tomos, which are effectively holes in the ground that keep going. You can't fill them.
Wait, say that again?
They're almost like a crevasse. I think it's that tomo, like a crevasse, like a lava crevasse, and you can't fill them. So,
really?
No, because they just it's like almost like a cave.
So it's like a disaster if you have one of those on your site.
Yeah, I mean, there's been stories of people just pumping concrete and it just disappears.
Goes forever.
So but usually it's the discovery of rock that is just a lot harder to remove. And it's breaking down. And also above all this rock is groundwater. We're very multi-terrain, multi-level. There is a lot of work prior to understand that, but there's no general rule of thumb. Every site's quite specific. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to check out a few photos of these tomos after this. That's super interesting.
I think it's tomo, yeah.
So then we've got kind of all these commitments made against the budget, all these changes made against the budgets. You got your risks. Costs will start potentially tracking up toward the budget or over the budget. You guys are the project manager leading these projects. So what do you do when these costs start to trend over budget?
We can look for value engineering opportunities.
In the uncommitted part?
What's that?
In the unconstructed parts of the project?
Uncommitted, unconstructed part. So substituting products out, changing specification. Usually you might get 5% at max out of a project because it's got to be uncommitted, unordered, all fit with the brief of the project and the design intent. And then you still have the cost of design and recompliance. Usually those smarts can come from the subcontractor level.
Yeah.
They put forward alternatives. And usually in the procurement phase, we ask them to sort of think about and flush out those ideas. So we sort of got them as a shopping list. Aside from that, I mean, the only big saving will be scope change. That's when you can go and do major impact change. But again, design and consent and time cost associated with that.
Or you delete scope,
You can pull from other budgets, but then that usually doesn't work.
Yeah, the clients don't like giving extra budget or pulling from other budgets very often.
No, they don't like that at all. There's not too many shortcuts to, you can obviously pull the handbrake on client instructed changes, but there's not too many plan Bs once you're fully going.
Yep.
Without affecting the actual project itself.
Yep.
So, usually we just try and, with contract or with clients, as soon as you open the door for a change, or as soon as you make a change, you sort of open the door.
Yeah.
And you sort of invite claims to try and reduce those.
Yep. And is that coming from... Sorry, you go?
I was just saying, and then a lot of cost is also just looking at trends that we've had in the past and preempting where cost is going to come from. And some of that cost is time, associated with time risk if a project does go longer. So that's just managing the expectations of your design consultants and anyone that needs to sort of make decisions, giving them the deadlines that are required to not have that commercial impact on the project. So
that's a key value add then for you guys as the project manager, is having all of the experience, knowing what may come up, how much it might cost, and being able to like almost predict or preempt that for the client. So like a Colliers managed project or an Andrew managed project would be managed much tighter to budget or under budget because you've been on top of all the risks early, you've been value engineering early, controlling the design early, and then executing a high quality project and all the scope basically within budget.
Yeah, and the contractors are fairly good in terms of also understanding the nuances about everyone aiming as one team. So they're actually, I'd say they're pretty good over here in terms of putting forward options and working together as a team to mitigate those risks.
All right. So that's good.
They're not there to grab everything they could and take up the opportunity. I find most that we work with, we work as one team because we've had multiple projects together, or it's a bit of a smaller village over here. It's a bit hard to burn those relationships. So I think it's quite important.
And I guess if the budget's not changing anyway, then grabbing more money is just a death sentence for the project anyway.
Yeah.
So
No, it just puts the project at risk itself. So I find generally very constructive. The risk that would be alarming is if you're not getting that cost transparency in a timely manner from the contractor and valued quickly by the QS, because you're just dealing with a lag and a dangerous tail. That means
months potentially.
Think you're at X financial position and find out that you've already pre-committed a whole lot of cost without sort of factoring that in.
Yeah. And that's where some of the AI stuff you were saying earlier could really help the predictive piece.
Yeah, it's picking up on the trends. So we're not working as in silos in the way that the project manager is not using just their past experience. We're using a series of projects that we've done across the sector to preempt.
Yeah. Changing gears to you guys as the PM. So you mentioned earlier, role client side QS, construction side, they'll also have, their estimators working with the subbies and things like that. So what's the role of the project manager in cost control? So you're obviously doing all the cost tracking. You talked about some of it, along with the QS, but what's kind of the role of the project manager? What do you actually do in the costs?
We also, part of our role sits as engineer, or sort of working with the engineer to the contract, which is a lot of our time is looking at entitlement to cost. So the QS will do the value on it, the measure and the rates, and we'll look at entitlement, interpreting the contract, historically what was agreed, which risk allocation was set. So that's primarily our role.
Yep. Looking at the contract from the point of view, is this actually a change? Is this like a valid claim, or is this included in the drawings?
Yep. And
to that level?
Yeah. And often it comes down to the tags and clarifications that were all agreed at contract, and it's all written content as opposed to drawn.
Yeah. Sometimes in a long document as well.
Yep.
So that's when you kind of get into that contract admin piece, which is not easy when they've been redlined by lawyers, within an inch of their life.
Yeah, it's recalling the history and the decisions that were made. It's probably quite a big thing.
Yep.
Because we're on the project through most commonly design, procurement, and construction. So there's the background, and some of that's not documented, and you're having to lean on the relationships you have with the client and the contractor to recall some of that memory.
So one thing I noticed a bit different, Andrew, in Australia and New Zealand is not a lot of the time there'll be like a dedicated project cost engineer, whereas it's pretty common, like in other countries, Middle East, USA, that they'll have like a dedicated project cost control engineer that like basically only does cost control inside the project team, in addition to having quantity surveyors and things like that. So do you think you need
That's in our role, we do have it as the quantity surveyor though on the client side.
Yeah. So you
So
have
their
the
role
quantity
is-
surveyor, the QS. Yep.
Yep. So that's their role, is to look at all the changes and put a value against them.
Yep.
So I think they are probably performing exactly the same role.
Yep. And are they doing the cost reporting? And
Yep,
because
so
you guys
they-
are doing an element of cost management, cost control inside Mastt. So what's the relationship between your role doing that project
So
cost
ours is
management
more
and the
of
QS?
a tracking role in the way we've sent an instruction out on behalf of the client to make a change, and we still need to, because we're the authority on the contract, the QS can't instruct the final cost. We just need to make sure that anything we instruct is scheduled so that it's not lost in the communication channels, i.e. the QS is aware of it and the contract is aware of it.
Yep.
So that it's not overlooked, and then the QS will provide us the acceptable value, and then we'll certify that.
Yeah. And tracking
unless
those
it's a
costs.
smaller project, there might be small
Yeah.
projects, to be honest, where we can't. There's no budget for the QS, which a lot of the values just need to be arrived at without, which is a bit dangerous. But
Yeah. So their QS's role in that project would really end once they've done the estimate and formed a budget, and then from there, all of the cost tracking, cost control is basically in the hands of the project manager.
yeah, I mean that's on smaller projects. I'd say 80% of all our projects do have a QS involved client side.
Yeah, it's a bit difficult to ask project manager to go assess, rates and things like that in a variation or a change that's coming through, because it
we don't.
requires takeoffs and things like that.
No, exactly. Yeah, it's a completely different skill set to what we've got. Our role is more coordinating and making sure that there's a running history and record of what's being instructed. Yeah, and a title.
And then onto like tracking all of this. So you kind of touched earlier on using spreadsheets, using Mastt. So how do you guys do your actual cost tracking? Is that all just going into Mastt?
It's going into Mastt, but it should be marrying up with what the quantity surveyors are doing. They've got a much more granular kind of report, and then we should be issuing variation orders once that value is agreed, which is more of a formality to sort of certify that value.
Yep.
And also Mastt is you have the fixed price sums, but you've also got all the provisional sums, which are budgets that sit under the contract. So we need to have those all recorded.
Yep.
And so they can be recorded. Yep.
And are you tracking forecasts in Mastt as well, so you get an accurate final forecast cost, forecasts and risks, scope, uncommitted scope?
We should be. It's definitely an area for improvement. I think a lot of risks haven't been properly priced or factored in true potential prices on them. So that's definitely it's a tool in Mastt that we need to utilize more.
Yep. Cool. And then at the end of all of this, at the end of the month, there'll be like a monthly
Payment
report
claim.
or a cost report, or operationally there'll be payment claims coming in, and then there'll be actual like a cost report that will get produced, and sometimes it gets attached with the monthly report, and it's a bit of a summary of all of the costs back to the budget.
Yep, we've got two. Usually there's sort of two versions of the report. The monthly PCG report will include financial schedule of what's been agreed, but then there's usually a second report that's client side only, which has here's what we've instructed, and here is the, so we say, placeholder number against that item, but that doesn't get shared with the contractor.
No. Yep.
So we usually have two, split them out. And each client's quite different. We've had clients that don't want the PCG reports to mention anything about cost. They just want that piece out.
Yep.
And then we've got some that are fully transparent. So I think every single one's different.
For the ones who want, if you're sharing a separate financial report with those clients, because it's not in the stakeholder PCG monthly report version, what's actually included in that kind of cost report?
I think the only difference is if items have been instructed and there's a placeholder sum next to them.
Yep. Will it have the budget and everything as well? And the committed to date, the overall position?
Yes, but it depends also what we've been disclosed at the start.
Yep.
developers will not always give us the total sum.
Oh, so you'll just
So
get one little slice to manage.
They'll have their contingency, and then there'll be other contingencies that we don't see, which is fine.
Yep.
We've just got to make sure that we're tracking against the numbers we have, and some also won't have any contingency. They won't tell you at all what it is. And it's just you got to tell them what you've spent.
Yep. So the cost report then is pretty thin. It's really just like, here's the contracts we're managing, here's all the changes, here's the payments that have been made.
Yep. The other one is, it's not just, this is what we like about Mastt, it's not just the contract with the contractor, it's all the other contracts you hold with the consultants. They take just as much management, and getting them all in one place is quite important, because there's always variations with the consultant scope of services. So having a single platform that we can go to is good. Is there the vision to move to like live reports in the future, as I'm like not have them as like a PDF, but have them so like risk tables are fine. Like there's a lot of information, but you can't get it to the dashboard. But if you were to hover over it, there's that information. There's the
interactive
more
report.
Of an interactive kind of.
It's actually coming out next week.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So it's initially just a live link, so you can share a link instead of sending a PDF, and it's interactive. Once that's out, we'll then allow you to share the link, but also put your finger on the data and snapshot it. So you can share both a live link or a snapshot link.
Okay. Yeah. Because
I'll send you a demo of it after this.
Yeah, there's a lot of like, for example, the risk register is super detailed, right, in the risk portal, but you can't flush that information to the front end because it becomes too heavy on the report.
Yeah.
So it's trying to, but it's there, but it's unfortunately it's one line item in the report when actually in the background's a very detailed.
No drill down. Yeah, there's no drill down. Yeah, that is something we need to work on, is adding the drill down onto the interactive dashboard, so that if you receive an interactive dashboard, you can click on something and then go a layer deeper.
Yeah, you can see the description, not just the one line.
Yeah. Yep. Expand rich. You can open the text up now. I'll send you a quick video, 60-second video next time you're on the toilet or something. You can watch it and
have a look.
Get a
but
quick update.
even you don't want to expand at all, because
the description can be long on every risk.
And it's only something, what about that? And you want to be able to look at it in more detail,
Yep. Thanks for that feedback. I've got notes on all that, and obviously the recording, so I'll check those out.
Cool.
Last question for you, just on the cost control stuff I had here, was around AI. So we've been taking a bit of a view that a lot of these kind of roles that we're doing, tracking costs or, handling this, will actually start to manifest more in like an AI agent. So you can actually just ask the AI, hey, add this in, generate me an instruction. Where do you see AI and that type of technology playing a big role in kind of liberating a lot of the drudgery of some of the admin side of the cost controlling?
The admin heavy process or workflow from us is you receive a query from a contractor, RFI. You don't know, when you receive it, you don't know if there's any cost impact or what the response is going to be. Then goes to the consultant. The consultant then responds with a instruction. That's when prior to that instruction being received, our job is mainly just tracking and also pushing a problem to be solved, should we say?
Yeah.
But as soon as we receive that consultant's advice notice, there's a marrying up of, here's the RFI, here's the response, and then we look at it with the, should we say, I call it the human in the loop kind of look at it, where we go, right, that's, we usually code them like that is no cost, or that has a cost, or that has a cost plus time. And that's usually the first flag. So in terms of AI, prior to that, it's finding relevant information to that. So say the instruction comes through and says, change to this product. We're going, well, what was the original product? So there's no comparable baseline. Without looking at the drawings, not having to tell whether we're moving from concrete to aluminium or, what. So it's the, what was the baseline? And then it's the procedural part of having to issue an instruction on top of that instructs the contractor where we've got to go and pull a little bit of, simple things like you got to pull the RFI number, the RFI title, and then we pull the instruction, a summary of the response, and then marry it up into our own instruction. Now that whole paper trail is one thing. And we issue that out. It's disconnected from a schedule at the moment, as I'm like, there's no tracking schedule that does this automatically. Tracking what we've said is no cost and cost. It's just a very manual process. And then obviously once it's gone out to the contractor as an instruction, then, as I say, that lag comes and they come and put a price against it. Now, usually we're then going to go and find out, well, which one are we doing it against? And there's then a what we call a variation order, which is the last step, which is certifying that price. Now, that all to marry up into one line. Here's the question, here's the instruction, here's the cost. And usually there's a bit of just a general disconnect between those documents. They're not lined up. So there's the AI importance of one pulling relevant information from the other, the contractor's question and the consultant's advice into our instruction. And the second part of that is the pulling baseline documents, searching through the existing specifications, etc. What was actually originally allowed for, pulling up the tag that we agreed 2 years ago on what the contractor had allowed for. Just surfacing that information. I see that's where the kind of role is.
Are you doing any of that now, like surfacing information from the drawings and documents?
Surfacing from the documents, less so the drawings haven't really.
Drawings difficult. I haven't seen many good AI tools yet that can really rip off a drawing.
So we're moving from, we were Copilot, Colliers Global's transferring us all to Gemini Enterprise, which has quite good image recognition. So I'm the only one with a license at the moment in Australasia.
Ah, cool.
Just about to roll out a full set of that globally. But that will be, I use day to day, hand in hand with AI now completely. And a lot of that's just surfacing it's surfacing correspondence. And, often with every contract admin you've got, there's a whole lot of preceding emails. And trying to, like I say, it's trying to console that down into something that you can go, well, here's the instruction, here's what's been discussed in an email. Pulling that together, quite that's the power of it, right?
And you've actually got Gemini connected up to your
SharePoint.
Outlook SharePoint.
And SharePoint, so it's all now live up there. So.
Oh, very cool.
And then we're doing, in terms of like reports, there's the bits that go into that people either copy and paste into a Word report or copy and paste into Mastt. And we're looking at it's like an interview style question. So it will surface information on the period and then ask you, is this risk relevant? Should we report on it? Here's a draft summary based on all the correspondence. So it's, a lot of that is pulling the data from emails and meeting minutes and things like that. To pull that context.
Wow, that's amazing. Actually getting it to ask you questions on what's relevant, and then actually it'll take that answer and then put it into the report that you're working on.
So that's and I guess that's the challenge with Mastt is you've got one data environment and then you've got an email data environment. And then even worse, we've got like an AConnect or a Procore environment, and it's trying to pull all the communication into one.
That's a great use case for AI, and like Claude Cowork is fantastic at that. Being able to pull across multiple apps. It's really good. You can't pull from Mastt yet, but you can connect it up with you might have heard this term, MCP servers. So that allows like authentication with the app without your login, and it can get data from these different sources. So I don't know if it can do email yet, but going across, it's like a cross-platform AI layer that can pull data from any of those apps.
Otherwise we end up in all these data silos.
That's a challenge. Especially when you're pulling a monthly report together.
So I guess back to your and simple the contract admin and that phase. The AI, if people can focus their time on that human input phase, which is is their entitlement, is here's the information at my fingertips and make a decision, as opposed to the whole saving PDFs and reconciling information on schedules. That's just, for me, I think that needs to be gone. That should be good. Be a redundant process, hopefully.
I'm with you. Well, there's labor shortages, all these types of things as well. So I don't think
Yep.
there's any job risk. That time is like instantly basically reinvested into like the next most important thing on the
Client
project.
interaction and everything.
Client interaction, yeah. Cool. Well, that's all I had, Andrew. Thanks for answering those
right.
questions. That was actually super interesting for me to hear about all of that, and those points on Mastt
That's cool.
and your feedback on those little problems, and that AI stuff is very interesting. So you're the AI guy, basically.
Yep. And there's a lot of ideas there. I think it's just trying to marry up between, everyone's using different products and just trying to marry up where the point is. And the other thing I'm trying to do is stitch all the Colliers data together, because they've got a lot of information across different service lines, but it all needs to come together into a bit more of a, repository.
Yep. Well, keep me posted on all that. We're doing a heaps of AI stuff over here, but mostly within our product. We also use a lot of it inside the business. The AI we're going to add into the product at the moment, it's mostly just for efficiency, as opposed to like the predictive side of things.
Mm.
More agentic, doing work for people, but inside the app, not so much outside the app, which is a layer that you're kind of operating at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it is the workflow thing, I think, is the first one. But the second one is the prize is the predictive preempting, and that's where we can demonstrate to the client the value.
Yep.
It's a lot harder to do, but it's still got to figure out how to make it. You get all this information, but trying to actually get something to learn it and to build on that repository.
Yeah, that's a whole nother piece of AI. That's the training on the data side is a whole nother thing. Because that's proprietary information, really. That should be competitive advantage to the firm that's doing that.
Yeah, at the moment it's just probably just being dumped into files and stuff that they've
all trapped.
read. But
yeah, that's right.
It's not actually building up the knowledge. It's not like a live agent that's building up knowledge there.
No, not yet. No, not yet at all. Yeah.
Got a long way to go, but we've gone a long way in 12 months, I think, in the industry.
Totally. Yeah, it sounds like you guys are doing really well. I haven't heard of many other customers like doing that type of stuff. Most of them are just still mucking around with like Copilot or something. They're not really actually leaning hard into AI, which I think is a big risk for those people, because they'll lose the efficiencies and the competitive advantage, and then the service will increase, and then they'll outshine their competitors. So I think you have to do what you're doing. So yeah, big props. Well, I've taken a bit more time. Sorry, Andrew, but
that's right.
Thanks for catching up. I really appreciate that.
Yep, sounds good. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Andrew.
Cheers, mate. Bye.
See ya. Thanks for watching, guys. If you want to know more about construction and get all the professional tips, tricks, and AI advice from real construction project managers, follow this channel for more insights.